so it's Michael here again, and today I've decided to do a tutorial on how to set up a door system. So, let's say fairly simple. It will build off of the interaction system that I did a tutorial for previously. So if you already have an interaction system, that's great. I would imagine it shouldn't be too difficult to incorporate what I'm showing you here into your own. If you don't have an interaction system set up already, then I do recommend sort of going watching the interaction system that I've got on the channel already. So the project that we're in at the moment, it's the same one that I've used for the two previous tutorials. That's the interaction system and the one for the dialogue system. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, first thing is go ahead and get some meshes in. So these are the meshes for the doors, the handles, things like that. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a new folder. I'm going to call this one meshes, like so. And then what we need to do is actually import them. So I've got my models here in Blender. So these are what I've modeled. So they're fairly simple. I'll just show you the wireframe. So there's nothing too special about them really. However, a few things you do just want to be aware of, particularly with these models, is the pivot points. So the pivot points on these meshes, so the origins as it were, is quite important because that'll affect how things, particularly when you're rotating assets, will behave. So if I just go into wireframe for a moment, I'm just going to select the main door. So if I go to the top view, we'll have the handles on the right hand side here. But these are separate, so they can actually be moved. But if we zoom in, back to top view, there we go. The pivot point is at the bottom right here. So when we go to rotate it, it rotates around that particular axis, and that's what we're sort of looking for. So if you are making your own sort of door assets, that is just something to be aware of. I do also have the door frame, so we'll just select that. And again, with this particular one, I have the pivot point in exactly the same place as the door. The reason why I've done this is just so that when we place these in, they're in exactly the same spots that they need to be, so it looks correct. Again, we have the handle backplate and then the actual handles themselves, so it gives you sort of an idea of how that works. So the pivot points for these is just at the center of the door, just to make it a little bit easier to line up. Again, with the way that these pivots are set up, so if we're from the front and we go to rotate it, it rotates the way we want it to. So yeah, so that is quite important. This one here is more for a sliding door, so it is slightly wider. So we'll show you how you set it up as well. So it's a little bit different in the sense that the pivots aren't as important. It's just making sure that, yeah, because obviously we'll be sliding across the plane as opposed to rotating it. So let's go ahead and get these imported. So so there is a plugin you can get for Blender, which allows you to send things directly to Unreal. Okay, so it looks like that failed. So I need to enable project settings, Python. Yes, if you are using that particular script for Blender, you do need to make sure enable remote execution is enabled. So I'll quickly try that again. So start our PC servers. So that's just telling Blender to communicate with the instance of Unreal that's currently open. So that's working fine. So settings dialog, so they're fine. So just need to adjust the path. So this is going to look in the main game folder, so that's the content folder, and it's going to look for the meshes. Yeah, there we go. Again, if you are using this particular plugin, under the export and extensions, you do want to make sure it uses the object origins. So this just makes sure that the origins are how they are within Blender. So hopefully that should do its thing. Okay, so it's just done the one. Yeah, so I forgot to put all these in the export folder. Let's try that one again. Okay, lovely. So now we have all the meshes in the engine. I have for myself set up the collisions on these as well. Yeah, so the doors are all correct. Quickly check them. Yes, that one's all good. So for the door handles, the door handles themselves aren't too important. We'll just do another quick auto just to adjust them slightly. Similar with the back plate. Okay. Okay, so that's those. That's the door. Oh, sorry, all the door meshes and things in. So yet again, obviously, you'd probably create your own meshes and things like that. They don't have to be particularly complicated. So that's up to you how you want to acquire those. So the next thing we want to go ahead and do is actually create a blueprint for our doors. So the way that I'm going to do it is actually create a parent blueprint that we would then create new doors from. So in the blueprints folder, I'm going to go ahead and create a blueprint class, and that's going to be of type actor. I'm going to call this one BP underscore door underscore base, and then go ahead and open that up. So there's a few things that we do need to do with this first. So we can go ahead and add some static meshes in here. So because I've already got some set up, I'm just going to use them as a base, just so we've got something to view. But from the base blueprint, they won't actually do anything. We'll set those up in some child blueprints in a second. So start with the door frame, and then we can add a new static mesh, and that can be the basic door. And then onto the door mesh, we want to add another one, another static mesh. That's going to be for the back plate, for the normal one. So you'll notice that this will drop down to the bottom, but yet again we can move this where it needs to be. And then add one more static mesh. This is going to be attached to the back plate, and that one's going to be the actual door handle. So sometimes when you add a new static mesh, it will place it to the origin, but it does so it's like a relative offset. So we'll just clear that and it should jump back to the back plate. So that's okay on that side. Okay, so it's not quite where we want it yet. So let's go in and adjust. Let's change the snap. So I think it needs to be a little bit smaller. Oh, try that again. Okay. So we're getting somewhere, so we'll move over this side a little bit. And then in terms of the height, I know the player character is about what, 180-ish centimeters, so probably about 100 on the height there is probably about right, so about the hip. Okay, so that's the door. In terms of these particular meshes, I don't have any materials or anything to put on them, so they will look like the default grey checker. So just going to drop the door frame as the root, just like so. And then I'm just going to rename these just so we know what they are. So that's door frame. That's the actual door. And then we got the handle backplate. And then the actual handle itself. Okay. So the next thing I want to do, this one's sort of specific to the interaction system that I've set up. So within that particular interaction system, I have an option to enable an outline. So for that to function, I do need to enable render custom depth when I can find it. Sorry, I was doing that in the door rendering. Yeah. So to get to that, so click on the static mesh under the rendering section. You want to find render custom depth, and that just allows us to sort of modify the actual stencil number. So I'm going to set that to 1 because that's what the outline uses, and then I'm just going to untick that again, just so that's like so. Okay, so the outline itself should work now. So, okay, so what we can do now is actually start looking at setting up the base of this particular door. So we've got the meshes in. We'll be able to modify what these are in any child blueprints. So because we're using the interaction system that I set up previously, we do need to add the interact blueprint interface. So when we add that, you should get some interfaces pop up on the left hand side, which is exactly what we want. With that done, let's go ahead and then add some variables and we'll start setting up some of these functions. So the first variable that we want to set up, that's going to be if the door is open or not. So we'll call that one B door open. So, and I'm just going to go ahead and stick that in a category called door state. And we can actually go ahead and set that as instance editable and expose on spawn. So the reason we do that is so when we place the door in the level, we can choose whether or not its initial state is open or closed. And we'll be able to set up so that automatically does what we need it to do. The next thing that I'm going to add as well is whether or not we want the door to automatically close. So I know it's not something that tend to see very often, but I think it's a good exercise just to show what it is that you can do. In terms of some of these features, you can add and pick what you want to in terms of your doors. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in a category called door auto close. And again, we can make that instance editable and expose on spawn. By default, we'll probably leave this as unchecked, but again, it's something you can choose and define yourself. And the next one I want to do is the auto delay. The auto close delay. So this is the actual time that has to pass for it to automatically then try and close the door. For me, I'm going to set that to 5 seconds. And we'll put that in that category as well. And then the final one is the auto close distance. So the way that I'm going to set this up is it'll actually check how far the player is when it attempts to close to see whether or not it should. If the player's still quite close, then it won't automatically close, so it has to be so far away. So I'm going to set this to 200 centimeters. So that's what, 2 meters. Okay, and then the last one I want to do is set up. This is called the interaction instigator. So when we interact with this particular blueprint as a part of the interaction system, it does pass itself, well, whatever it is, so the player character to this blueprint, which allows us to get information from it if we need to. And this just needs to be of type actor. So we're going to set that there. And I'm going to put that in a category called interaction. Like so. Okay. So there's a few things we can set up here. So if we double click on the interact under the interfaces, we should get this. And we can just go ahead and set in like so. So when this particular interface event gets called, we can store the interaction instigator in there. Okay, so a few other things I just want to set up as well. So I've got the outline state. So this is when the player character is looking at the door, so we know to interact with it. So I'm just going to have it so the outline's on the door. So for this, I just need to enable the render depth. So set render custom depth. So some of this might seem familiar if you've done like the NPC, the dialogue system already. So that's set up. Okay, and then we get the interaction text. So as a quick reminder, so if we quickly play and we look at something to interact, we do get the little interaction prompt that has some text in it. So this is where we can set what that text is. So I'm going to use a select and I'm going to plug in the whether or not the door is open or not. So this allows us to then set what the text would be depending on whether or not the door is open or closed. So if the door is not open, So we want to set that to show open, and if it is open, we want that to say close, like so. And then we get the interaction hold timer. Yet again, this is down to personal preference. I'm just going to set it to 0.2, just so the player has to hold for 0.2 seconds to interact with it. You can leave it at 0 if you wanted to, and that'll be kind of like an instant interact. But yet again, it's completely up to you how it is you want to set those up. Okay, so if we come back to the event graph, because we have set up these 4 interfaces now, we want to look at what actually happens when we interact with the door. So first thing we want to do is actually get the door open boolean. So this is so we can check what we want to do based on its current state, and we can just connect that up to a branch on the interact, just like so. Now the next thing we want to do is actually call some functions for opening or closing the door, but we don't actually have these set up yet. So we'll go ahead and get those set up first. So the first function we want to do is called open door. The next one to do is called close door. And then we want one for auto close. Like so. So in regards to these functions here, generally we would actually override them in the main, in any child blueprints that we create. So anything that we put in here in these functions would happen in any child blueprints as well. So for the closed door, there isn't anything we want in the particular base, but for the open door, we do want a few things in regards to the auto close. So when we open the door, we can get whether or not auto close is enabled. So we can drop that in and connect to branch. If auto close is true, what we then want to do is call auto close function that we've got. So what we can do is do set timer by event, and we can plug that into the true. And then to complete this node, we've got the auto close delay. We can get that to the time. So as a reminder, I've got that set to 5 seconds. That's so. And now we do actually need to tell this node what it is that we actually want to call. So if we pull from this little red dot here that says event, under the event dispatcher, there is a node, an option called create event, and that should give you this little node here. So move the space. And then what you can do in the drop down, you can actually select the functions or function that you want to call. So in this particular instance, we want to do the auto close, like so. So in terms of the open door, that's everything that we want to call in the base blueprint of this particular door. The next thing we want to go ahead and set up is the auto close function. So at the moment we've got it set to call, but there's nothing in there. So what we want to do in this particular instance is actually check to see whether or not whatever's interacted with the door is far enough away to automatically close. So the way we can do that is nice and straightforward. So we just get the interaction instigator. We then get its location, so get actor location, like so. And then we get the actor location for the door, so get actor location. And then what we want to do is get the distance, so just type in distance, so distance vector. Like so, we'll just connect the 2 locations in. And then we want to check to see if that is greater than or equal to our auto close distance. And we just connect that in like so. With that done, we can pull from a ball, connect to branch, like so. And then this is where we can then decide what we want to do. So if it's the case that the player is far enough away, we can just go ahead and call the closed door function. If it's not, what we want to do is actually start another event timer for the auto close. So what we can actually do is just copy this function again that we did in the open door and just drop that into the auto close. So just to run through that again, so when the auto close gets called, it will check to see how far away the player is. If they're far enough away, it'll close the door. If they're not far enough away, then it'll run itself, call itself again after another 5 seconds, whatever the close delay is. the next things that we need to do is, if we go back to the event graph, we can start plugging in some of those nodes in here. So if the door is open, we want to close the door, so we connect that to the true on that branch. And if the door is closed, we want to open the door, so we can go ahead and do that like so. If you're not using my interaction system, the next step is probably not needed. So with the interaction system that I've done the tutorial for, when you interact with something, it does prevent you from interacting with anything else again. So it kind of like stops you from holding the button down and having it constantly repeat the button press. So you do sort of run into an issue where you interact with the door and then you can't interact with it again until you look away, which obviously isn't something that we want to do. So thankfully within the system there is something that we can do, and that's called the hit recheck. And this just tells the system to just check what you've hit again, and it kind of like refreshes everything almost. So what we need to do is, once we've done this door, once we've interacted with the door, we can then essentially tell the interaction system to check again after an X period of time, so we can re-interact with the door once we've completed. So for that, what I'm going to do is create a new function. I'm just going to call this one enable hit recheck. This is just to keep the blueprints looking just a little bit tidier. So what we can do is we get the interaction instigator again, and then we want to use the get component by class. And the one that we want to get is the interaction base, like so. And then we just want to do a quick is valid check on this, just in case for whatever reason whoever's trying to interact with it doesn't actually have an interaction component on there. If this is valid, what we then want to do is go ahead and call the enable hit recheck on the actual interaction system itself. So we can go ahead and do the set timer by event again. And I'm going to set this to half a second. So this is just a time between clicking to open the door or close the door that it'll then allow you to interact with it again. So we've pulled through the event square again. Under the event dispatchers, create event. And you'll notice on the list, all it's showing is what's the functions in this particular blueprint. But what we can do is actually from here, from the get component by class, we can plug in the reference that we've got for the interaction base into here. And you'll see the list of options for the functions change. And we just want to select the enable hit recheck, like so. So that's going to call that function after half a second when this particular function has been called. So with that done, if we go back to the main event graph, we can then go ahead and drop that into here, and we just connect it to both of the ends here. So it'll just run through, and then it'll always call this particular function. Okay, so in terms of the base door, that is it. So for the most part, it doesn't actually do anything at the moment, which is perfectly fine. Nothing to worry about. What we now need to do is, if we come back to the content browser, we want to go ahead and create a child blueprint of this door. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to call this door underscore swing. So this one's going to be a swing door. So if we open this up again, well, the child blueprint, everything will be exactly the same as it is in the parent.